speaking of what we do, let me introduce Wolf Murphy.
Thank you. I am surprised, gratified, and a little shocked to be here. I've been meaning to come to this conference and check it out, and haven't had the opportunity. And what I do is typically a little different. I mean, everything I do is drum related, except for occasional things that I do to make that paper, computer stuff. I don't do a lot of the same style of facilitation. I do a fair amount of facilitation. I spend more time teaching traditional rhythms, not just teaching them, but preaching them. I am a proselytizer for that style of play. It's my passion. And I'm going to say something I never ever say. I'm kind of intimidated to be doing this. I'm as nervous as I am in front of a classroom full of 7-year-olds.
It's really about the same thing there.
And they're only slightly worse than 7th graders. And that's because I've been really impressed. I have gotten more useful, usable information at this conference. If I had any idea, I would have been coming on a yearly basis, and I will be coming on a yearly basis. So, I really am blown away. I haven't talked to a single person that I did not instantly like.
Not yet.
I'll get to you.
Meet Dave.
So, a little. Thank you very much. A little bit about myself before I launch, and this is going to be a little bit of a roller coaster ride because this talk, which I've given a number of times, one, it's always changing. There's always new research. There's always new stuff I get geeked by. Two, I've added a section recently. Shamanism now has its own little section, and usually this is a 90-minute presentation. So we're gonna squeeze a lot in quick. So think of this as, and I know how little I know. Think of this as sort of the table of contents to the tour guide. Okay? I put up a blog page on our website. We have a website, it's jamandshop.com, that has the resources. Because I started doing a handout, and then I'm like, you can't click on any of this. So there's a lot of the books, a lot of the authors I'm going to mention are up there so you can find that information, find that research. Jammin, Jammin, shop. But I was clever when I got the domain, and I got all the versions with the G, and I got the versions with the in front of it. So pretty much you should get funneled there. A quick little bit about myself, and this is the stuff that I say in the boardroom to justify being in a boardroom with this many tattoos. I hold my master's in English. I did my undergraduate work going for a triple major in English philosophy and psychology. I wound up with English and philosophy and a minor in psych. Did my master's, I took all 3 GREs, and I did the best on the English one, so that's what I did. My master's in, intending to go back and catch up the other ones. I am a nonstop student. I am so fascinated by the things that I'm going to present tonight that I probably, I spend time reading every day. I highlight everything I read. I go back and I type everything I highlight into a database so that I will remember it. I have one tip for you about retaining information. If you are not interested in what's in front of you, stop and come back to it. If it does not have your attention, this is cognitive neuroscience, you are not going to write that memory in a long-term fashion. I got into drumming. I always wanted to drum. My parents did not want anyone drumming in the house. I bought my first pair of congas with no idea what to do with them before I bought a bed or a table for my first apartment. And I had to go down to the part of Chicago that my family encouraged me not to go to get the congas. And then I was a very bad drummer for a very long time. And when I started getting to be any good, I was an even worse drummer. Because I was, my name is Wolf, and I was a testosterone jockey in drum circles for years. 4 years.
Oh, that was you!
Yeah, recovers.
I got broken of that, and one of the things that broke me of that was, one, how much other testosterone jockeys pissed me off. That should have been a clue, right? And two, when I went to do the health rhythms training, which I did very close to its inception, I was drumming with some friends in the hallway, and Barry Pittman came by. I didn't know who he was.
Oh.
And he came up to me and he goes, "Wow, you're a very accomplished drummer." And I said, "Thank you." And he said, "This is going to be really hard for you." And absolute truth. Because what I learned was that if I actually wanted to drum for healing, if I actually wanted to drum for community, my chops, my technical competence, my speed, all of that was useless. Well, not useless, but all of that was so secondary, and it was actually more likely to prevent me accomplishing what I really wanted to accomplish. So the process of me getting deeper into drumming and healing has been a continuous process of humbling. Because I still hear somebody start doing that 160 BPM stuff, and I still want to be like, I can do that. I can do that. I can put a roll. I got something extra on that. That's not what it's about, which was such a revelation to me, and something I still have to work with. I want to start with getting some, and I want to keep these quick, but I want to get some of yours. What's the most amazing instance of drum healing, musical healing you have seen? And try to do one set. So here's 2 examples. Spontaneous spinal adjustments in the entire thoracic region from somebody in Shavasana on a mat during a gong flow meditation. You could hear it throughout the entire room. One more. 85-year-old woman gets up out of her wheelchair, takes her oxygen off, boogies. It's the first time she's danced in 25 years. She had not spent that long standing in 10 years. And she tried to get her kids to get our contact information. It was just a random drum circle at a UU church for a pagan festival. She tried to get her kids to get our number so we could play at her funeral. That didn't happen. But she cried. Unbelievable. All right? So let me get maybe a good half dozen. Anybody who's got one, let's do hands so we keep it organized and try to keep it quick. Yes?
I taught special ed, had a boy with autism, nonverbal, use the drum table, play, we stop, and he said, "More drum, please."
Awesome. Okay, music as medicine. Yes?
Older woman came to me before a class I was teaching, a certain class, drum circle mashup. She said, "I used to play cello in the symphony, but I've lost my hearing, and I'm depressed, and my therapist thought this might help. Can you help me?" And I said, "I don't know." But she took to the Bahia, the big red Reno bass drum. And for months, that became her through line. And she told me many times, and right now at her senior center, 12 years later, that the drum gave her life back. Because she was able to feel the music, trust the music, and connect with people even though she couldn't.
Awesome. Shamana. Yes, Sandy.
I had a spontaneous drum circle at my house one night. It was a dinner party. They wanted to see what a drum circle facilitator was. There was a woman there with Parkinson's disease and a problem knee. She was on crutches. She'd never drummed before. We drummed for about 40 minutes, and it was a good time drumming. No talking about what drumming does for you or any of that. The end, she goes, "I feel so good." She did not use her crutches the rest of the evening.
music medicine, and community drumming. Yes.
Hospice group, 300 kids, there's a bereavement thing, they all lost a parent. They just got done with a ceremony where they had to write a letter to the parent and read it and allow it to their group and throw it in the fire. So as you can imagine, it was a really emotional time. I had been doing this gig for probably, it's probably going to be 6th or 7th year in a row. They've been doing it for about 10 or 15 years. When the gig was over, the nurse came up to tell us that for the however many years it was before the drums started showing up, the clinic was full every night after the ceremony with belly aches, like people who were sick and headaches and all kinds of stuff. And since the drum circle's been happening, the clinic's been empty every night after this.
Okay, shamanic, music as medicine, and community drumming. Okay, Rucker.
Team building, drum circle outside, on a mountaintop with a fire and a full moon. But it was corporate. It was corporate, and I'm running the program, and I've got the stuff I've got to deliver, and metaphor delivery for team building, whatever, and just something happened. And they went to what some of us call that place. And all of a sudden, I knew that the whole program was now done, right? And they were just going to drum all night if I let them. I looked over at the boss who hired me, and he was also gone. Okay, and he kind of looked up with starry eyes and looked around, he looked at me, and he did this. Okay, and that was it. And we went for about an hour and a half, non-stop, no words, no nothing. We went corporate training to that place.
Awesome, awesome. And definitely community drumming. And that place is the shamanic place.
Shaman.
Yes.
About 4 years into my business, I took my first gig at a memory care place in Los Angeles, and families were invited to come as well, and I was working with early onset memory care, which can be a huge range, and they allotted me 45 minutes. An hour and a half later, I'm joking with this woman who lives there, and her nurse, and realizing that the people next door were her son, and they were weeping, and I couldn't understand. And they said, we haven't talked to her for years. She hasn't, and I'm sitting here just joking with this woman. I said, we haven't talked to her in years. I haven't seen any kind of,
Awesome. Music as medicine. Okay.
I'm at a VA nursing home every other week, and when I first got there and would start my session, a combat veteran would come out of the room closest where we would set up and freak out every time, and they'd have to come restrain him. And so then I suggested maybe they have the PT person come in with him. So the next week I came, they'd run him into the PT person. And I went into Marine Corps Anthem, which he was a Marine. From that minute forward, now, every week, he's in the back screaming that song at me. He stays almost the whole session. Some weeks he leaves, but there's no more meltdown when he sees the drums come in the building because we found a way to connect him to it. And so now he's good when he sees me instead of
Awesome. Shamanic and community. Okay, a couple more.
One of my first drumming gigs was my wife and I did a Camp Whole Heart. It was about 200 kids with born with heart defects. And we showed up with all our stuff, and the parents started freaking out because they didn't think their children would be able to do it because it makes you strenuous. And the children begged for it. And so when we did it, and these children were just loving it, we're in there, the parents were just amazed that they were actually able to do it and having such much fun, and it was just one of those first experiences that really solidified that's what we wanted to do as a job. And we still get letters from some of these kids. They're like, this is one of the best experiences. We haven't been allowed to be able to have fun like this. Everybody coddles us. No, we don't want you to stress. You don't want you to stress your heart. And they loved it. They thought it was the best thing ever.
Community and kind of resultant shamanic. Okay, two more. Yes.
Me? Oh.
You had your hand up, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I work every other week with a group in an after-school program, and there are kids that don't live in the best neighborhood. And we've been struggling getting them to get interested enough in the drums without having all those behavior issues. So a couple weeks ago, I brought the singing bowl with me, and I figured I'd start the class with that. And the amount of quiet that was in the room as we passed it around and let the kids each try the singing bowl. First of all, it had never been that quiet with the drums, and second of all, they encouraged each other. Learning the skill of playing, tracing it around and getting the sound out of it in a way that they just had not been doing with the drums. So it's pretty transformational.
So, kind of community, but definitely shamanic. Oh, you can see these categories overlap.
Yeah.
Okay, one more. Go ahead.
So I do a monthly drum circle at assisted living facility. I was in a different day, and this woman joined our circle that I had never seen before. She grabbed the loudest drum, and I was like, oh no. She was impeccable with her timing, and she was singing in all these different languages and had all of us singing. She was leading the circle. And we talked afterwards, and I said, who are you? What do you think? And she said, I'm a Holocaust survivor. And music kept me alive. And she lost her spirit.
Awesome. So, by quick show of hands, how many people have seen physiological healing as a result of drumming? How many people have seen what we would call psychological healing as a result of drumming? How many people have seen sociological healing as a result of drumming? How many people have seen conflict resolution as a result of drumming? All right. What's fascinated me has been beginning to understand the mechanisms. Why does this happen? And I think this is a really useful thing. One, now I am not a marketing person. I suck at marketing. I'm god-awful at self-promotion. I need to be reminded when I do things to say, oh, there's product in the back, you know? Terrible at it. However, in my experience getting gigs, getting facilitation gigs, if you know enough of the related research to present a scientific reason that what you are going to do is going to be effective, you can get buy-in. That's one of the things that can get you into the boardroom. Two, understanding these mechanisms. There are specific technical things about drumming that we can apply in any situation. So, here we go. The roller coaster is about to begin. We're going to move through shamanism, and I'm going to stay right up front. I am not a shaman. I am at best a wannabe witch doctor. Technically, shaman is a term reserved for individuals performing these functions in a hunter-gatherer culture. There's other terms when you move out of that culture, and that evolves past that. But there's mechanisms that we can be aware of and understand. Then we're going to talk about music as medicine, by which I mean the actual beat and the characteristics of the rhythm as having a specific, definable, understandable, and even predictable effect on the human brain. And therefore, if you can affect the human brain, you can affect our physiology. And then we're going to talk about the research that's out there about community trauma. And the specific aspect of that we're going to talk about is the psychoneuroimmunological aspect. So we're talking primarily about the health rhythms. And for each one of these, there is a primal spiritual foundation in traditional cultures. The examples I'm going to use, there are more. When we talk about music as medicine, shamanism, that's a given. When we talk about music as medicine, I'm going to talk about Malinke drum healing. When we talk about the community drumming, empowerment drum, which is related to what a lot of us do. That's the style of facilitation I mostly do, is I'm a trained health rhythms facilitator. Went back and took the training a second time when the genome study came out because I wanted to get that information direct from the horse's mouth. I was so excited about that. I'm a rhythmic entrainment intervention therapy provider, which is the music medicine aspect. I know, doesn't that sound great?
Love it. Great.
I love having that on my business card.
Say it again, say it again.
Yes, I am an authorized rhythmic entrainment intervention therapy provider. Every once in a while, just that little thing on your card might open a door, right? But we're also going to talk about where these practices came from, sometimes in a very direct and understandable way, sometimes just as co-evolutions. So shamanism, and here's the first question. How many of you are all aware that you are a walking multiple personality? By show of hands. Right?
Yes.
We're not gonna, by show of hands, how many people know that there are at least 5 or 6 different personas that you can manifest based on the situation you're in? Right? that laugh means that 5 or 6 is amateur level. So shamanism is a fascinating topic too, because what happens in shamanic work is the shamanism is using a vast variety of tools, and guess what? Drumming and dancing are right up there at the top of the list, to affect a person in such a way that they can make physiological changes in their health. It's not just physiology, but it goes that far. There is a fantastic book that I encourage everybody who has enough masochism in their soul to check out. This is not an easy read. You're gonna want to screen up on dictionary.com to work your way through it. It talks about more brain biology and more brain chemistry than I understand. So I've read it once. I read it all the way through. Now I'm going back through sentence by sentence sometimes and reading until I think I understand. But the basic idea, and this is really exciting, is that we can think of our brain as being built up of a number of different modules. Okay? The one that everybody has heard some about and will understand is the tripartite brain theory, right? And that theory goes in its most basic form that the oldest part of the brain, that stuff right on top of the brainstem, including things like the hypothalamus and the limbic system, and that is your lizard brain. None of reptilian brain, exactly. None of this is really precisely accurate, as we will see. But, and then layered on top of that is the part we added when we were mammals. Well, when we made it past the lizard eat, sleep, and seek reproduction phase to mammals where emotion gets introduced and some other things. And then on top of that is the fancy human neocortex, the new part of the brain. What actually happens in practice in our brains, and the detail they have about this stuff is shocking, shocking. What actually happens is different modules are loaded at different times. I don't like the computer metaphor for the brain, because DNA is way, way, way smarter than any computer we have or will ever build, right? The notion that we can understand DNA when DNA built us just kind of cracks me up. But for different things, different parts of the brain are activated. The simplest example of this, and they all have their own wisdom. The deepest parts of the brain have their own wisdom. They have their own language. It is the language of symbol. It is based on, at the most, this is my favorite new word, it is based on, at the most primal level, neurognostic structures. Don't you love that? Yeah. Neurognostic means the pre-existing structures that determine how we interpret our experience, even in utero. We have a template. And it's built at that primal level. And then the other stuff grows on top of it. Shamanism is about using techniques to turn on the older brain modules. It's like having a Mac and loving your OS X, but having Photographer 4, which only runs in OS 9. So every once in a while, you gotta boot the OS 9, and guess what? You have to turn off OS X to run OS 9. Our brains work the same way. The simplest, most direct example that everybody will understand is fight-flight, right? Something happens that is shocking enough that you are in fight-flight, a different part of your brain is making the call about what you are going to do. And the important thing for us is to understand that drumming for a long enough period of time, and the fancy terms are ergotrophic and tropotrophic. ergotopic and trophotopic. You can activate different brain modules by either sensory deprivation, shutting everything off, and entering into, well, sensory deprivation, right? That turns on different parts of the brain. Drumming and dancing, the physical exertion, the stimulus, the auditory stimulus, for long enough, puts you in a different brain set. It's not just a simple different state of consciousness. You are running completely different software, which has its own valid understanding of the universe. It has its own valid understanding of your relationships with other people, with your community, and it makes different decisions than you might. And those old brain structures, there will be a quiz at the end. What do those old brain structures have that the neocortex does not? They control our physiological processes. We cannot consciously, well, you can do the whole yoga thing and the meditation thing and get some control. But those older brain structures are where things like heart rate variability, endocrine system, hormone production, those are things that are mostly controlled in the older brain structures. So if we can change where we are at in terms of the software we are loading at that moment in our brain through shamanic practices like drumming and dancing, and I mean that's just a good idea regardless, but we can access the parts of the brain that understand on a more immediate sensual level, a more primal level, and have a greater impact on our physiology. All right? That's our shamanism piece. But the takeaway is we have an immense ability to change where we are coming from, how we are perceiving. You know, the truth. When you get into that frame of mind, this is my experience, you understand people better. You understand people's motivations better. You are more conscious of neurons and the mirroring that we all do. We all look at people, we interpret their expressions. What does that mean? What does it mean? What does it feel like if I do it, right? You know who doesn't do that? This is a weird aside. There's going to be a couple alleys that I fall into. You know who doesn't do that? Sociopaths and psychopaths. They have inadequate mirror function. They do not have the empathy available to them on a neurological level. There's some amazing research going on that. All right, so that's our shaman piece. It's just the idea that we can play our brains like an instrument to activate different modules, understand the universe in a different way, and that can make profound physiological difference. Okay, that's piece one. Questions or comments? Okay, good. Thank you.
Yes, and what was the title of the book that you were referencing?
Okay, the title of the book is Shamanism, a Biopsychosocial Paradigm. All of the references I'm going to give you are, it's by Michael Winkelman, Winkelman, and there is the newest blog page on the website, not only has the names and titles, but has Amazon links and everything else. And should you be one of the authors who is featured there and be sitting in the room, and you would like it to direct somewhere besides Amazon, and dude, you're an incredibly hard act to follow. just saying. But if you would like it to go to your website, just send me a note. So, all right. So, music as medicine. This is getting more targeted, more specific. So we all have brains that generate multiple brain waves all the time. The brain waves are generated in different regions of the brain. Alpha waves are primarily cortical, so they're in that new part of the brain. Theta waves are deeper structures. Delta waves are primarily all generated in the deepest structures in the brain. Our state of consciousness is determined a lot by the preponderance and organization of the different brain waves. And now there's new ones. In the last year, there's new ones. There's gamma waves, which they think is how we have self-awareness They're so fast, they tie all the other waves together into a coherence, and that's a big part of our experience. But now there's lambda waves, and those are way, way up high, and then underneath the delta waves, which are what we feel when we're sleeping, there's some other ones they're starting to be able to measure. Like everything else, at first, the atom is the smallest thing, and then they're like, oh my God, there's protons and electrons and neutrons, and then they're like, holy crap, there's neutrinos and quarks. And when we get better tools, we'll find out that quarks are made up of who's, right? The who's live on the quarks. So it's infinite. It's always infinite in both directions. The brainwaves are kind of going that way, but we do know the characteristics of those states. And this is a really funny talk, because I'm going to be keeping you in beta state, thinking, information processing, problem solving, active mind, in order to tell you just how good it is for us to be in alpha, right? Theta. So I acknowledge and honor the self-contradiction inherent in the structure of this presentation. The brain does an amazing thing. This is extraordinarily well documented. If you provide it with auditory stimuli at the same speed, sound waves are measured in hertz, brain waves are measured in hertz. If you provide it with auditory stimuli in the same frequency range as brain waves, the brain is like, all right, we'll go there. And it produces more waves in those regions. That's a fundamental aspect of shamanic drumming. Shamanic drumming runs, so the simple rule of math, which I'm not going to explain, is whatever the hertz is multiplied by 15, that's your beats per minute. So shamanic drumming is mostly right at 60 beats per minute. That's the deep theta. There's all different little things, like creativity is somewhere around 6 or 6.5. There's a link to a chart on the resources page. You play at the right speed, you can choose what brain waves to encourage, and that, in turn, affects your state of consciousness. This is amazing. I spent years teaching myself with the metronome on my phone, blinking at me because I found it very hard to play a djembe softly enough to hear any metronome, much less one on my phone. Teaching myself to play at these different speeds. And you reach a point where you can use your drumming to change your brainwave state intentionally. Now, being able to play at those speeds is something you have to keep up. And I have to go back and do it all over again because I haven't done enough of it for a while. So I do a brainwave entrainment drumming thing at some yoga studios, where I start at beta, which is fast. Beta is fast. High beta is Buddy Rich territory, I can't do it. Beta is fast, but then you slow it down, and you can visibly see people dropping further and further in. I did one that was so good that I would be releasing it. I recorded all of them so I can see how bad I screw up. I did one that was so good I would be releasing it as a CD, but one dude, when he got down all the way into delta, which is sleep, he needed sleep more than he needed visionary experience, and he snored very loudly for the whole second half. He said it was the best sleep he had ever had. And I was like, and if that's what you need, that's what you get. But we can choose these speeds as a way to choose the brainwaves we are encouraging in ourselves and in clients and in groups. It's amazing what happens. And I already mentioned earlier, I find the middle school age horribly challenging to drum and facilitate for. But I learned quickly when I'm not there to facilitate, when I'm just there to teach rhythms, I'm comfortable with that. And I make them play slower. And the number of incidents of misbehavior goes way down because I'm changing their brainwave state to keep them calm. So, 4th graders, if they can do cuckoo at 120 BPM, I'll do it. 7th graders, 90 BPM. That's the love vibe in music. 90 BPM. That's where you're going to find your ballads. That's where you're going to find your love songs. And it's because that's how this affects our neurophysiology. So, we're going to go quickly through the healing aspect of that. That's the background. So there's a dude, Jeff Strong Institute. He founded, he calls himself the go-to drummer for dying bands because he wanted to be a famous kid drummer and play for great bands. And the reason he studied other styles of drumming was just to get more gigs. He found a guy from Trinidad, I think it was Trinidad, who said, you gotta learn everything. If you come with me, you have to learn everything. And this guy went around to people in his community to drum for their kids if they were showing things like autistic spectrum disorder symptomology. And he would play for them until he found a rhythm that visibly affected the symptomology. And then he would focus on that rhythm. There's some tricks to playing in alpha, one of which is it's a one drum thing, one is a primary track thing. And playing any entrainment rhythms, you have to vary it enough that people don't fall asleep and quit paying attention. For alpha drumming, you don't want to get people too focused on analyzing the rhythm because you can pop them up into beta. So there's some sophistications to it. But he watched this guy and he was blown away. So he took it a step further and began studying it. And what he found was that specific rhythms affect specific symptomology consistently, not perfectly, but consistently, regardless of race, age, gender, doesn't matter. He has a rhythm in some crazy time signature like, 17/4 or something that reduces self-stimulating behavior in functional autistics. And he took it to the point where you fill out, he has a CD program where you fill out a thing of all your symptoms. He generates an audio CD for you, gives it to you. You play it almost self-audibly because you don't want that to be the focus of your attention, and it changes your brainwaves. You may already have made this diagnosis on your own. I might be just a tiny bit ADHD. But I get too scattered, and I'm trying to do too many things at the same time. I still use the CD I got as part of the training. Where this came from, he learned it from a guy from Trinidad. There's a great book called The Healing Drum by Yaya Diallo. And he talks about the same thing. If you, oh wow. All right, let me go quicker. If you break your arm, you go to the guy that knows how to set a splint. If you got a stomach ache, you go to the guy that knows the plants. And if you are showing imbalances in the rhythm of your interaction with your community and your responsibilities, you go to the drummer. And my favorite part of the book is where he says, and so the drummer plays to find a rhythm that restores you to normal function. And if the drummer doesn't do it quick enough, they move you in with the drummer. I thought that was hysterical. Come on, we'll see more medical cures. If we go back on the third visit and we're like, Doc, it ain't working. What's for dinner? You know, we will have a very different medical establishment. Music as medicine. Music as an actual intervention. All right, now the super exciting part, well, as always, is community music making. And the part I'm going to focus on, there's a lot of aspects to it. The part I'm going to focus on is what makes health rhythms specifically work. So health rhythms is, I believe, one of the only, there's a lot of research into drumming. It's good research. Health rhythms is one of the only ones that has been mostly biologically based, and I love that. I want blood drawn, I want stuff measured, I want graphs, I want palpable, provable physiological changes. And when I first went and did the first health rhythms thing, aside from setting me up for success by telling me how hard it was going to be for me, I was blown away by what they had done. They had shown that group empowerment drumming with their protocol reduced a couple proteins associated with cancer resistance in a statistically significant way, which if you do research studies, you learn that there's ways of determining whether something is making enough change to call it a result. Increased killer T cell activity, huge immune marker in the human body, just group empowerment drumming. I did an interview with him a little bit ago, which John has kindly offered to post up for greater visibility. Just asking him because I've seen so many people say, group drumming does this. And it's not the same thing always. There are specific features of the health rhythms protocol that were necessary before they got positive biological results. In fact, he had to do the research 7 times. They had 6 failed studies before they got the formula that works, and it's been repeated, works every time. Some of the things they did that didn't work were just subjecting unknowing participants to a drum class, or even to just a facilitated drum circle. They had no idea what they were walking into. They didn't know what was being measured. That sets you up for stress. That's gonna mess with your results when you're trying to measure basic wellness. They finally combined it with his other research and understanding of the psychoneuroimmunology, which means the way our psychic state affects our neurology and how that impacts our immune system. And there's several very cynical study things we're about to go through very quickly. One of the studies was they went to gang neighborhoods and they measured the immune system, standard markers like things like killer T cell activity. They measured the immune systems of the kids in the gang, the kids not in the gang. Whose immune system is better? Why? Exactly. It's more cynical. The kids in the gang, some of them get to carry weapons. Some of them don't. There's a lot of reasons. 3 strikes, age. If you hit 18, you're going to be tried as an adult if you get caught carrying an illegal gun. Whose immune system is better? Kids with the weapons or kids without? Absolutely. Why is that?
Watching their back.
Empowerment, control, agency.
Empowerment. The feeling of having control over their lives. So the protocol evolved to the point where the health rhythms protocol, we're not going to spend much time on that, although I tell everybody, do the training, regardless of what you're doing with drums. If you're interested in the community aspects of drumming, that training kicked my butt. Both times I did it, the first time I did it, it was so different than what I was doing. It was humbling. It was really humbling. I was just like, no, the fact that I can play my crew at 180 BPM and switch between the parts and blah, 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 I'm messing people up. Everybody's like, I can't play with that. They're going home, they're sicker. For true. So it was really, really challenging for me. That was the first step of that. The really important things are giving people a sense of community and giving them a sense of personal empowerment, personal power. They don't just have to participate to get that biological result. They have to feel individually heard. And so the protocol changed to include a lot of things that focused on getting the individuals in the group to become facilitator, to lead, to be the person who started something and was followed. All right. Then the other research I have to touch on this is the genome study. It is the most cynical piece of research design ever done. Bittman is a genius on an unparalleled level, and it is a source of great dark comedy to me at times, because what they needed to do was they needed to see for a bunch of people what stress-related hereditary markers they had, which means if you are causing yourself enough stress, your environment is causing you enough stress for your life choices, your body tries to tell you to stop. And the mechanisms it has to do that, because it's just the body, it is not the cortex, it is not going to have a rational conversation with you. It is going to make you sick. It is going to give you hypertension. It is going to give you certain kinds of cancer. Those are the diseases that our body communicates to us that we are doing too much stress. So they needed to stress people out. So they got everybody in, a bunch of people, almost 50, measured the markers they had, and then stressed them out. Here's how they did it. They put them in a badly lit cubicle with a jigsaw puzzle and a $100 prize to the person that got the most pieces in 1 hour. Genes turned on across the board. I'm looking at them, I'm like, most of my jobs, that'd be a pretty good day, right? So cynical. Split them into 3 groups. One group keeps doing the jigsaw puzzle, no real change. So 1 hour activated what was going to activate. I'm sure enough more would do more, but one group went to the employee lounge, a couple genes turned off. The final group did the health rhythms protocol. It was a little different. They redesigned it a little bit, but instrument-wise, but it was a little different. more than one marker per person turned off in that group. It was the first big study that showed we can change ourselves on the genomic level. So this is a foundational cornerstone if you're really interested in epigenetics research, how we change our own genes. But it showed that we have the power to control our stress response on the genetic level. How ridiculously exciting is that, right? And it's that community and empowerment that lets us do it. The traditional correlate to this is Ngoma healing in Central and South Africa. If your life is messed up, if you got an illness, if the new sheriff is picking on you for no good reason and you can't do anything about it because they are the new sheriff, if the colonial structure still existing in the vast majority of Africa is personally affecting you in a negative fashion, and people don't realize that Africa don't own Africa no more. My friends from the Congo tell me that everything that comes out of the ground, gold, uranium, diamonds, tin, silver, everything, goes to Europe for processing, and the government, not the people, the government in place in the Congo gets 10%. 10%. So, if you're stressed in those areas, you go to a Ngoma healing. And you know what they do? You come in, you tell them what's up with your life, and they create a song for you. Everybody in there is somebody who went to that group because they was messed up. You come in, they create a song for you, they sing the song with you, they get you to play and sing the song. The whole group is focused on that one individual, community and empowerment. And then that individual becomes part of the group and helps the next guy. And they help everybody else. It's incredibly beautiful. It's such an amazing idea, and it's, to me, that's health rhythms. It has all the same hallmarks of effectiveness. So, that in a quick nutshell, like I said, I'm sorry, this is just, we did chapter titles, right? There's so much more. There are parts of that, I'm sure, after experiencing all the amazing things you all do, and the amazing interest you have, and the sincerity, and the intent to heal. I've seen a lot of drummers, myself included, who are coming from a place of ego. I've seen facilitation that was coming from a place of ego. You know? It feels really good to be standing in that circle, right? But if you're there just for that self-aggrandizement, that's not going to provide what people need. If you're there for the people, that's a whole different picture. You know? And that extra step of, and I can't tell you how hard this was for me to accept, that extra step of getting out of the circle and being like, you know, makes all the difference in the world. Get the people in the circle to lead. Get them to facilitate. Make sure they are heard. And you're adding an immensely powerful step to the biological process of what we do. So, all right. I'm not sure I finished quite on time. I tried to keep it. Okay, good. So there's a little closing thing I want to do, but before we do that, let's do questions, and I'll try to be brisk in my responses. Yes?
I had two pieces of information. Can you help me try to connect them? You mentioned that shamanic drumming is almost all of it's at 60 BPM, beats per minute, 60 BPM, and 99% of all its pop music is exactly 120.
Yes.
Is there, what out of those, that's to my
Pop music is right at the low alpha range. So the 120 beats per minute music, which is also the standard dance music, is right at that 120. So when we are doing, which is an interesting thing for doing just public open drum circles, that's when you see people get up and start moving, is when you hit 120. Except for the tribal belly dancers who like everything at about 80 to 90, right? But, so the alpha range is, instead of shamanic treatment music, that is tribal music, to get to the point where, through stimulation, remember I said there was the aerotropic and trophotropic alterations in the consciousness we are manifesting. That 120 beats per minute is what you usually see for dance, community dance music that allows people to get into that other mental space. That's alpha. Alpha is information processing, sensory processing, relaxation. Another cynical fact, I'm sorry, I collect cynical facts with a passion. We had a device that proved to be the single most effective device in advertising in the history of the planet, and that was the television. And the flicker rate on the television is at, yes, is at 120. Alpha. You relax, you're receptive, you're more likely to believe what you're told. But at the 120 beats per minute, that's where it's the repetitive nature and the commitment to the physicality of it that begins to really change consciousness. So the shamanic drumming, when you're drumming for a patient, I should have been more precise. If you're drumming for an individual and you're doing that shamanic journey to find out what they need, and you're trying to get them into a deeper phase, that's where you have that 60 beats per minute. So that's when you see the rattles and people who are doing vision work. We talk about vision quests, soul journeys and all that. That's mostly right at that 60 beats per minute. That's not the only speed you can shaman play at. So thank you for letting me clarify that. What else?
Hey,
Yes.
don't you have amazing books and drums for sale here?
You're just after that $5 free me. The books I have are my primary study, besides all this stuff, has been traditional rhythms. I'm a junkie. I sit around. My idea of entertainment is to watch Cuban or rah-rah rhythms that were recorded in the basement in the 1980s and notate this stuff. And I love the stuff that's so complex I have to slow it down to half speed to figure out what they are doing. And so there's 2 encyclopedias of world rhythms. Some of it comes from sheet music or training DVDs, and a lot of it comes from listening and watching footage. And every rhythm I pick, I find every single good, qualified version I can, because I am obsessive compulsive. And then I share it all in case there's anybody else with that kind of passion. The one thing I love, and I didn't even say anything about this, the one thing I love about the traditional rhythms is they are structured to create community through polyrhythm. The idea of everybody cooperating, I love the visual, I'm going to totally steal that. I love the visual of our rhythms, are that 4 on the floor, Their rhythms twist together. They don't even work right in Western notation. You can't get a time signature that are you counting the 6/8 part or the 4/4 part? What? So, but that music, the way it is, builds community, because community is built by doing something together that takes cooperation, that takes commitment, it takes some time. Learning to play makru, if you want to play the Tunun parts and the djembe parts, and if you want to work in Mbembe Bakuras, along with Mama Nikita's version of makru, it requires all those things. So that's one of my other fascinations. Great book on, sorry, great book on West African rhythm used in a therapeutic context. It's relatively new. Sine Casper, who's a music therapist working in Florida, wrote a book called Feeling the Call. She uses West African rhythm as an intervention because of the community and cooperative nature of the music with a wide variety of clientele. And that's another book I very highly recommend. That one just came out last year. So, like I said, I kind of had to trim this down so I could say enough about everything. So, anything else? All right, I want to do a little closer, and I don't need this for that. All right, so I love chanting. I have a voice that I have been assured would be made ironically welcome at any drunken Irish pub crawl. And I don't care. I want to do a dirty tree hugging hippie chant. It is from my favorite dirty tree hugging hippie, and I think it'll take all this beta brain that I inflicted on you and begin to bring it down a little bit. And what I want to encourage is, it's so simple that, and this is the only important term I didn't get to, If you want to do effective drumming to change people's physiology, your biggest danger is habituation. In other words, they get bored and quit paying attention. So in order to avoid habituation, after we begin this chant, if you are secretly a closet opera coloratura singer, and you ain't practiced your scales enough, if you got some blues in your soul, or better yet, some gospel, or even if you say, hey, Rising Appalachia's freedom would go right on top of this, so this is so open-ended. You can do whatever you want with this. And the words are this simple. It goes, come and become one, be one. Does anybody know Freedom? Freedom's Fire?
Yeah.
Okay, this is from Freedom.
Your favorite dirty hippie, yeah.
My favorite dirty tree hugging hippie.
Mine too.
So, and the melody is very simple. It just goes, come and become one, be one.
Come and become one, be one. Come and become one, be one. Come and become one, be one. Come and become one, be one. Come and become one, be one. Come and become one, be one. Come and become one, be one. Come and become one, be one.
Thank you.